Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Vampire account, and I'm going to be facing off against a Greenskin opponent. So I have been experimenting with a lot of different comps with Vampire accounts, and this has kind of become one of the solid comps that I've been using that I found to be pretty efficient in most matchups. So I'll give you guys a quick rundown. So in the front line here, I have Skeleton Spearmen. So these guys I feel are very cost effective, slightly more expensive than standard skeletons and zombies at, I believe, 375. They're shielded, which actually makes a considerable difference when facing off against factions that have a lot of missile infantry. Granted, the Greenskins don't always bring a lot of missiles, but regardless, sometimes they'll bring, even this Ragnarok Spider has missile attacks. But, again, it's going to be good against, Error Boys or, Night Goblin Archers or things like that. So it's not a terrible investment. And for a little bit more, that you're investing on the top end at 75 extra, it mitigates a lot of the risk. So a decent choice and, usually what I go with. So they also have anti-large, which is quite good. The the Greenskins do bring quite a few monstrous units, and you guys can see he has a Ragnarok Spider as well as a Giant. So, a fair amount of cavalry. So at the end of the day, that anti-large will be quite pertinent. And again, they do have charge defense against large foes, which, as I just explained, with all these monstrous units and large foes, they're going to be pretty good. In the secondary line, I have Graveguard. I really, really like these guys, and the Greenskins usually aren't the most armored faction, so bringing just the standard armored and shielded with anti-infantry is usually a pretty good choice in my opinion, and they do have a higher baseline of melee defense, so usually I like to go with these guys as opposed to the great weapon option. In the back line, instead of great weapons, these are the guys that, in my opinion, you should be bringing for that punch and that armor piercing is the Cryptors. They have poison, and in the long attrition battles, they have regeneration as well. So a very, very cool unit. They're very fast with 50 run speed, so they can chase down pretty much any Greenskin unit with the exception of the Cavalry, who have, let's see, how much speed do these guys have? It looks like 64, so they're not that much slower, which is pretty awesome and definitely getting your bang for your buck. And then I've been using these guys a lot, the Blood Knights. I'm a huge fan of these guys. They have anti-large. Look at that charge bonus at 75. That's quite massive. So when they get in there, especially if they get a nice charge off on like an Ragnarok Spider or a Giant, they're going to do quite well. So I like these guys a lot. They're very, very expensive, so you have to certainly be careful with your investment because if they, get dumpstered or surrounded or tangled up with, fodder units, it's a very, very bad situation. So then I also brought some Vargeist. Sometimes the Greenskins will bring Doomdiver Catapults, those type of things. So I feel like the Vargeist are a very good choice at just kind of dropping in and plugging in as needed. So, and again, they're not a very armored faction, the Greenskins that is. So these guys are pretty good at picking off, weaker, lesser armored units. So, and it looks like as far as my leadership goes, I have a Vampire Lord with the Lore of Vampires. And as far as what I bring with him, it's just Invocation and Heck and Gaze of Nagash. I don't think you need much else. So I really like those. And overcasting that Invocation of Nahek with kind of the Death Star, as they call it, is quite strong. And then, last but not least, I have a White King. He's a great unit to have kind of in the front line with your troops. So I usually leave him with the main army. He encourages, and he also is rocking 2 potions, which is quite strong. And his melee stats are really, really powerful. He has 410 weapon strength. He's armored and pretty sturdy himself, so big fan there. My opponent's army, he has a combination of Orc Bagans, Black Orcs. He has 2 groups of Savage Orcs, additional Black Orcs, some more Savage Orcs, and then he has the two Boar units over here. He has the Orc Boar Boy Biggins as well as the Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins. So he'll probably try and charge in with these to absorb the initial shock and then have the higher damage Savage Orcs come in after them. So we'll see how that goes for him. And then, of course, a Ragnarok Spider as well as a Giant. As far as his Lore of Magic goes, he has an Orc Shaman with the Big Wa, and it looks like he has Fists of Gork. There we go. He has the Gaze, and then he also has the Foot, the Stomp, the all fun spell there. So we'll see how this goes. So it looks like my opponent is immediately running to this forest line. I don't think he wanted to take a square engagement with me, so it looks like he's going to get here and maybe try and shroud some of his units using the forest there. But regardless, I noticed he was darting for that jungle very quickly. So I wanted to disrupt his ranks. So I dive in with my Vargeist as well as my Vampire Lord. And I get a nice little shock here and do pretty decent damage to these biggins. Unfortunately, some of my Vargeists do get tied up, but hopefully they'll be able to escape there and get out of that area. So I noticed that this unit is kind of isolated now. It's off in the wing, so I bring my Blood Knights over here to see if there's any opportunity to pick things off, and I quickly realized that there wasn't much there to work with, and he was quickly able to regroup his line. Thankfully, I didn't take any losses with the Vargeist in terms of just raw units, but they did take a bit of HP damage, and I was able to kill a few biggins, so it wasn't a great trade, but it also wasn't bad. So I immediately kind of see where everything's going and reform my ranks to match him, and I do cast the Gaze of Nagash on this Orc Shaman, and I honestly think that ability is a little overpowered. I mean, just look at how much damage that did. If I had been more on top of things and had those Vargeist waiting, I could have easily just chased this guy off the battlefield. So in the front line, we're going to go ahead and engage here, and this is exactly what you want. That spider just wasted basically his shock value against these skeleton spearmen, and that is what they were designed and I guess born to do in their previous life. So I was definitely very happy about that. And at the same time, he's trying to tie up my Blood Knights here, so I go ahead and engage with some Grave Guards and some Cryptors, and this is a great group here. So the Skeletons will absorb whatever their initial attack is, and these Cryptors are going to come in and devastate these guys. So I immediately kind of isolated this group and pulled these Vargeist over to help, and it's definitely going to go bad for him there. In the front line here, this Spider has kind of gotten through a little bit and is engaged with these Grave Guards, so I send the White King. The White King is very good at focusing down these type of units. But unfortunately for me, you can see my front line dropping really quickly. He used Ere We Go and is really using some, powerful buffs to make his Orc infantry extremely tough. And you can see those Spearman groups are pretty much gone already. And these Cryptors are starting to have some trouble with these Black Orcs who have both Ere We Go and the Fist of Gork. So thankfully for me, I was able to isolate over here and win. And also, these Blood Knights were able to get a great charge. And look at the initial damage they did to that group. That 70 charge bonus, as well as the anti-large, they're so good against opponent's cavalry. And having those Vargeist nearby to kind of fly in and help out is just so good. Vargeist plus these Blood Knights make a very good anti-cavalry unit, and I look forward to testing them against Demogryph Knights. So if you guys have had any experiences with that, please let me know how they panned out for you, and I look forward to hearing about that and collecting any feedback I can. So I easily win the Cavalry Battle, and these Blood Knights just did so good. And they basically chased off both of my opponent's cavalry units and did amazing damage. So they definitely paid for themselves there. In the front line here, I took a little bit of a beating over here, but I was able to get a good Invocation of Nehek and also another Gaze of Nagash on that Orc Shaman. So thankfully, he's going to definitely get run over here in a moment. So I do bring in the Blood Knights in the back, and I see this Giant just exposed. So you guys can see, when they get in there, look at the Giant's health start to go down. I mean, it's getting chunked in spurts, that nice initial shock, and they also engage on this Spider. So that was an extremely valuable situation for them to engage in. And though they're in low health, they've already paid their dues. I mean, they did pretty considerable damage to both of these large units. Over here, my opponent did pretty well, but I do get a nice Invocation of Nehek against these on these Grave Guards and on these Cryptors. So that whole melee group that he invested with Ere We Go, with those Black Orcs, I was able to heal up and just kind of negate the damage that was done. And now these Vargeists are flying over, and they're also reaping the benefit of Invocation of Nehek. Such a good ability when it's overcasted. So definitely, that western flank over here did very, very well for me. Over here, it's a pretty close battle, but these Black Orcs are definitely having trouble. They've been poisoned this entire battle, and they kind of got rear charged a little bit from those Blood Knights. So the Blood Knights, though they're gone, they did very well. They not only eliminated my opponent's cavalry from the battle, essentially, but they also did a lot of damage before going down to these Giants. But regardless, he still does have a fairly healthy Arachnarok Spider, as well as this Giant. I mean, it's low health, but its leadership is still pretty good. I mean, at 82 leadership right now, so it's not being pressured. And it's going to be able to turn around and support these Black Orcs here. But regardless, most of his troops are starting to suffer from, the attrition of the battle. And he does, I think, have his Orc War Boss here, who's pretty healthy, and I don't think he's used any potions. So it's definitely going to be tough, but I do use a Gaze of Nagash here, trying to target that Spider down. You can see that ability is just so strong. I don't know if it's what makes it that much better than, other missile attacks, but it is just so good. And I've seen it, I was playing a game against Karl Franz, and it almost one-shotted him when I overcasted it. It's just freakishly strong. So at this point, I was able to win the western flank, and he does have some reinforcements coming back, but I just used my Vampire Lord to chase him off. And again, like all the Vampire units, they do cause fear, so these units are going to rout very quickly. You can see they're at negative 20, and that's still a pretty healthy group of Savage Orcs at 31 and 29, and some of the Black Orcs are pretty low. But regardless, if those units had come back and been able to help out, would have made a big difference. But in these very close long-term games, when you're playing as Vampire counts, something that'll often win you the game as long as you can keep your Lord alive is the attrition and the fear that all of your units cause. Because if you look at, pretty much all of the undead units, they all cause fear or terror or some other funny business like this. So the leadership of the opponent's troops definitely go down. My White King is still in great health. He was being focused by my opponent's monsters, but I was able to use potions there to really kind of wrap it up. And, he has a few groups of orcs coming in here and there, but for the most part, this battle's over. I used the Vargeist to make sure that Arachnarok Spider stays off the battlefield. Did not want that coming back, so definitely a close battle, and a lot of it came down at the end of the day to that Blood Knight engagement. That was just so good for me, and perhaps if my opponent had used like Fists of Gork or something to buff his cavalry and have brought his Orc War Boss over, it would have made a big difference in that battle, because once they were able to win that and then crack the back line and do that huge shock damage to his monstrous units, I think that was the turning point in the battle. So the skeleton spearmen, they absolutely did their job. You can see most of those spider skills were probably on skeletons, which is exactly what you want. The Grave Guard did quite well, holding the line. You guys saw at the end of the battle, they were still standing strong, and there was a bunch of them left. The Blood Knights, though they didn't get a ton of kills, they just absolutely demolished my opponent's cavalry. So that was great. Cryptors, can't say enough about these. You use the skeletons to absorb the shock, the Grave Guard to kind of like fill up the holes that are created by the opponent's charge, and then you have the Cryptors come in to do the finishing blow. And Cryptors are so good against units like Black Orcs, who, you know, are really susceptible to the poison, and they also do have armor piercing. So, and Vargas, of course, you know, I'm a big fan of this unit, especially against Greenskins, because they don't have any flying counterpart that can really deal with them that well. So my opponent's army, I mean, the Giant and the Spider got a lot of kills, but again, a lot of those were on skeletons. Black Orcs are always a good choice, but a lot of that at the end of the day, like I was telling you guys, came down to his cavalry definitely losing that battle there. So definitely a good game to Zapeter. Look forward to seeing you again on Ladder, and just want to thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate the support, and more content coming soon. Take care.